Welcome to Mentoring37, the video podcast brought to you by the International Mentoring Community. My name is Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Certification for IMC, or International Mentoring Community. And co-host is Doug Lawrence, who is the Director of Education for IMC. This video podcast is about all things mentoring, about mentoring for the world. And we bring topics to you that bring to life mentoring and what it means to serve as a mentor and to be a mentee. And we look forward to these shows because they happen twice a month, in the first and third Tuesday of the month. Now, one of the things that we always do when we set in motion one of these video podcasts is that we read the definition of mentoring that we use. And today I get to share that with you. And then what I'll do is I'll come back and give you an outline of where we're going for today's show. So, the definition. Mentoring is about a two-way trusted arrangement in which the mentor and mentee can form a deeper and richer collaborative alliance, resulting in both learning and growing personally and professionally. Now, Doug, is there anything in that definition that you just want to highlight, like a neon sign blinking in the storefront?
Well, there is a lot that is kind of blinking, but I think the biggest thing for me that always seems to jump out, and I see this quite a bit with the work that I do, is the aspect of it being a two-way trusted arrangement. And for a lot of people are caught up in the mentoring paradigm of the old traditional way of mentoring, which is, the more senior person with the gray hair on top of the mountain, passing on their wisdom, and a lot of telling, not a lot of guiding. And that's where we seem to, that's one of the shining moments, I guess, coming out of this definition that I see.
Okay, and if I was to jump on something today, it would be the concept of alliance. We're not using the word partner. It's an alliance. It's building something together. So each of you is bringing something to this that will grow something that you each individually could not do on your own. And that's something to really think about when we're into today's world of mentoring, is that the mentor can learn something from the mentee. And of course, the mentee is learning something from the mentor. And then they're doing something together for the world. And that's a great way to look at it. So let's pop over to what makes up a show. And what happens is that we are in dialogue. And we do invite guests on when we can find someone who'd like to jump on with us. Or if you want to jump on, if you're listening or you're watching the video right now, that you want to jump on and be a participant, then we can certainly invite you in and get you involved. But the program is based on three segments. The first segment is to go over one of the action outcomes that are part of the certification profile. The second segment is about a question that someone's asking, and that comes from the community as we may go out and search out a question. And the third segment is bringing you up to date with what's happening in the international mentoring community. And each part has about 7 points to them. So 3 and 7, 37, that's where that number comes from. But also we organize the show so it's like less than 37 minutes as well. And that seems to be a sweet spot for us in terms of sharing what we want to share on this video podcast. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the first segment. But when we do that, please remember is that one of the reasons we do this is for collaborative conversation. So you'll notice that Doug and I will get into collaborative conversation, and that what we're doing is we're looking to create a way in which to co-create community. So what we're actually talking about actually ends up distributed, like different segments go into different aspects of the community. They go in as resources, as part of the courses. They go up as media snippets so that people get to know who we are. So it's very co-creative using collaborative conversations. So that's why we're always inviting people in. So again, just to share it again, if you want to join us live, come on in. We certainly would enjoy that. So let's get into the first segment, and that's to take a look at action outcomes. There's 68 of them that are involved with the Certificate of Competence. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the one called Discuss the Types of Mentoring. And Doug has jumped on board and said, hey, look, I'll take care of this one. And what we're going to do is turn it over to Doug, and he's going to share some ideas with us around the types of mentoring.
I'm going to, my approach to this was to look at this from the aspect of some of the areas that I do a lot of the mentoring that I do, a lot of the areas and the sort of the techniques or the processes that we use. And so there's a number of different types, I guess is the best words, types of mentoring. So there's one-on-one and face-to-face. So let's maybe talk about that. So you can have a one-on-one mentoring relationship, mentoring arrangement, and that can be both in person and can be done virtually as well. And so keep that in mind as you take a look at that part. The one that's the most popular and the one that I certainly like the best is a face-to-face, in-person meetup or meeting with a prospective mentee. And I find the reason for that is with face-to-face interaction, you get a chance to observe the body language and you get to feel the energy levels. And there's some other things that face-to-face gives you, as well as you get to hear the person's voice and the different, challenges and stuff. In a face-to-face relationship, I feed off a lot of what my intuition tells me that I'm getting from the conversation that I'm having with the person. And so that's kind of the whole face-to-face thing. Virtual is where you're using technology to have a mentoring discussion with an individual. So today I'm mentoring a few people in a virtual relationship. I'm mentoring a couple of young men in Kingston, Jamaica. And we use Google Hangout as an example for a technology solution to be able to do that. For somebody to be comfortable in working with a virtual relationship, you need to be very astute at body language and effective communication. And by effective communication, I mean the ability to be able to understand and hear what the other person is saying. And so it's really important that you're plugged in, you're present, even though it's a virtual relationship, but you need to be plugged in and present while the conversation is going on. Because I'm able to be able to sense or feel virtually what is going on the other end of the conversation. And as a result of that, I can tailor how or where I'm going to guide, say, my two guys in Jamaica, where I'm going to guide them to next, and what are some of the different topics that we may need to discuss in order to help them better position, in order to help them, continue on their path to success. So those are, out of the gate, those are the first three types of mentoring that seem to be the most predominant. The next one I want to talk about, and then I'm going to come to you, Stephen, and get your thoughts so far as we go along. But the next one is group mentoring. And let me set the stage for this. So group mentoring can be done in a couple different ways. The one way is, and we talk about this coming up later on today, is the aspect of the mentoring circle. And so I'll save some of that for a little bit later. The other part that I have used group mentoring for is when I'm dealing with a situation in an organization, and typically it's due to a breakdown in communication. But what happens is you have different work groups within an organization that all of a sudden are falling apart. They don't communicate with each other, and all of those things that ultimately then impact customer service. The clients, the customers are starting to say, what's going on with this organization? I think I'm going to take my business elsewhere, because they don't even get along amongst themselves. And then when they come to to my job site or wherever, they're bringing all that baggage with them, and it's not a pleasant experience. So the process that we typically use for that is it's mentoring one-on-one, so working with individuals within each of the different groups. It's then mentoring within the group to get them to be able to communicate within their work group, and then it's work group to work group. And so then what you do is you some of the times I will have them bring problems to the table, and then what we'll do is we'll talk about it, and then we'll come up with potential solutions, but it's everybody contributing to what we're going to do to move forward and be able to put into practice. So that's kind of the group mentoring piece. And like I said, we'll talk about the mentoring circle a little bit later on. Thoughts so far?
Yeah, I agree with you. The key with the group mentoring when you're looking at an issue of some kind, though, is the line of confidentiality. That's an important element, because you want the people to be asking the mentor questions, but they're also asking each other questions, because what we're doing is we're getting them to think about becoming mentors to each other, peer mentoring. It's what really helps to unfold, but there's always lines there of confidentiality. There might even be lines about how far we might go if it all of a sudden starts to feel a little bit like counseling. So there's that kind of element. But that facilitator circle that you're sharing, which is really great to get mentors together to talk about mentoring, that is an exciting time. And I know we're going to chat a little bit more about that later. But I just wanted to chat or share the notion of the line. Where are lines that you don't want to cross?
Well, and what's also interesting, and just to kind of add to the whole idea of the mentoring circle piece, is that, and I just did one last weekend, and what came out of it when we were talking, we had somebody new join the group, and everybody was kind of talking about, this is what I get from it value-wise and all of that sort of stuff. And well, one of the attendees who has sort of been with us right from the beginning said that for me, it's not so much about being involved in mentoring or being a mentee or whatever. They are a mentee, they just don't know it. But the biggest thing that come out of all of this was the aspect of, based on the conversation that takes place, the facilitated conversation that takes place, they take stuff away that helps them back in their workplace in being able to communicate with people that are a challenge for them. So they end up acquiring tools that they can use on an individual basis. And so that's another bonus or a plus that we sometimes don't talk about when we're talking about group mentoring or the mentoring circle. Like, why would I want to join a mentoring circle? Well, there's a good reason why right there. So my next one I want to talk about, and I'm only going to talk about this one briefly because it's not a good word to use, is the old adage of reverse mentoring. And reverse mentoring, sort of where that comes from, is a younger person acting as the mentor for a much older person. Typically, it's done to help somebody work their way through technology challenges that they may be having. And so the younger person, who is obviously more astute at being able to navigate through all the different technology hurdles and that's where the younger person will work with the older person to help them. It has been labeled as reverse mentoring. I'm going to say to our listeners out there today, pick up a dictionary and look at the definition of reverse, and reverse means going backwards. And I'm sorry, but any mentoring relationship or arrangement that I have, nobody's going backwards. We're going forwards. And so reverse mentoring, to me, is effective mentoring because it's a two-way trusted relationship. And so then from there, we get into peer-to-peer, and we've kind of touched on that. The next two that I want to talk about is informal and formal mentoring. And when you put into practice or you implement a workplace mentoring program, it is a combination of formal and informal mentoring. So with formal mentoring, it's somebody is assigned to mentor another person. With informal mentoring, there's no formal assignment. It becomes, as I like to refer to it, a way of life in the organization. And people they know that when they wake up in the morning and come to work, they're going to learn something from somebody else, and conversely share some of their wisdom and knowledge. And it's not a structured thing. It's not a formal mentoring, workplace mentoring program. It just happens. And people learn and grow, and they share all of that quite willingly and freely. And so I have just a couple more that I want to touch on. One is training based, and where the idea around this comes from. You send somebody off for some training when they come back to the organization. The mentoring, that they may be assigned a mentor, but it's very, very focused on the training and sort of leveraging what they learned while they were taking the training program. So it's almost like a leadership development program, which is also, something that I'm very passionate about, where mentoring needs to be plugged into that. Training based is somewhat the same, but it's very specific. The mentoring is very specific to what the training that this person was away taking and has come back. And so now we want to reinforce the learning that they have gone through is the best way to approach that. Excuse me, we've talked about traditional mentoring to some extent, but traditional mentoring is the gray-haired sage on top of the mountain, passing on their wisdom and knowledge. And so that's the traditional. Traditional is not as predominant today as what it was years ago, and that's because of the mentoring paradigm that's taken place. And it's now not being replaced, but being enhanced by effective or modern mentoring. This, obviously, we could go on for quite a bit longer when it comes to the different types of mentoring and where each could be used. But my intent behind this was to give everybody just a real kind of a snapshot of what each looked like.
Well, for sure, and thanks for that. There's a couple that I would add because I find them interesting, because there's a lot of people offering books and calling it a mentor program. It's true. Authors, they are mentors. They just don't happen to be present, and you're reading about what's going on. If someone was to add the online course from the author themselves, then there's a little bit more connection that's going on. But unfortunately, we don't necessarily get an opportunity for the mentee to ask the mentor questions in that sort of capacity. Having said that, I also know of a really great technique is when I go to read a book, one of the things I do is I ask the book 3 questions. He asked the book 3, what? No, what I do is I just write down, what are 3 things I want to know from the book? Because if I read the title, the front jacket, the back jacket, and just get a sense of what the book's about, look at the table of contents, I can ask the book 3 questions. So in a way, right, reading autobiographies and books and using this little technique, and I'm the mentee, I am asking the mentor some questions. So it's just kind of a fun way to look at it. And another one that I want to bring to our attention is this notion of speed mentoring. And again, it weaves into something I'm going to chat about a little bit later, because I'm seeing it happening in a certain industry, and I just like to bring that to everyone's attention. So those are just a couple that I would add at this point. But today's question is one that was asked of me, and it sort of tickled me a little bit because I didn't see it coming. And the person asked, what are the disadvantages of mentoring? And I went, I'm so used to sharing this whole notion of what are the advantages that I had to step back for a second and go, oh, what's going on here? And so I dug around, both in my own experience, and I've been a facilitative mentor for 20 plus years now. And I just sort of went and said, okay, what would be those disadvantages? So I wrote down a bunch for myself. Then I did a little bit of research on Google to find out, are people agreeing with me or not? And I found a couple of nuanced ones. And so the list will actually be in the show notes, all 11 that I found, but I'm only going to highlight a few of them at this point in time. The first one, and I think we would all agree, is that the mentee is told to be in the mentoring arrangement. And there's no wiggle room there for the mentee. And the mentee may come in with that crossed arm kind of feeling about, oh, I've been told to be here. I don't know what this mentor's got to offer. But yet, if you unfold that, we do know that mentors do have something to offer. But it is a disadvantage because it sets things in motion that has a bit of a block when you're coming together. You sort of hit a wall. And everyone that I read mentions that one. It was the first one that I listed. So obviously it's one to take into consideration. There's some other aspects of things like incompatibility and conflicting insights and preferential assignment and personal bias and being prepared or not being prepared. These are elements about the disadvantages. But again, what I want to do is I want to lean into something that I found most interesting in my time working in organizations or working with organizations. And it's the double standard of mentoring. They're saying, middle managers, you need to get mentoring because you need to do some learning and growth. You need to do some continuous improvement. But I, as the senior executive, don't need to get involved in any kind of mentoring because I've got it all nailed down. And you see that and you feel that and you go, what is going on, this double standard? So that becomes a disadvantage because, again, the middle manager who's going through the mentoring is looking and going, yeah, but I can see where the person I report to could use some mentoring, especially from the mentor I'm working with. And that double standard, again, can form a little bit of a block, and we need to take a look at that as well. So one of the things that I do there is that I always have a conversation with, if it's a mentoring in the workplace program or I'm being asked in the mentor, and I know Doug does this, is, well, how widespread is the mentoring? Where is it? Is it just localized or is it actually in the whole organization? And what I attempt to do is get people to dance as a whole. Now, the other one that I find kind of interesting is the concept of familiarity. And what happens is you start off in a mentor-mentee acquaintance, and what you can do is move into a mentor-mentee friend. Now what? You became a friend. There's a line there, and when we talked earlier about lines, to negotiate that line between being an acquaintance and being a friend, and to continue that relationship on, you have to look at the words you're going to use. Now, I don't have a magical answer that I says, well, we moved to friend, we don't call ourselves mentor or mentee anymore, because that would make it a disservice. All I do is raise the awareness that something might be going on there and you need to pay attention because of things like I mentioned earlier, things like personal bias, or even things like reliance, how a mentee might depend on the mentor. Again, you want to be alert to that. And then the last one, and let me use it as a bonus, all right? I said I'd give you 3, but I think there's a bonus one here. It's about the situation in which the mentee is coming from. In other words, they're arriving into the mentoring arrangement. And when they return, can they actually apply what they learned through the mentoring arrangement? And I've seen it many, many times, and I believe Doug is nodding his head, and he knows what I'm talking about. You can have these great conversations, but you can't apply it. That can become a disadvantage, can become disheartening, and it can lead to well, why am I actually now in this? So be alert to that one as well. Any one of those that you want to pick up on and give a quick nod to, Doug?
Going into an organization where, and you talked about, you know, the mentee being told they're in a mentoring arrangement. I do some work in what I call termination versus mentoring. And in this particular case, the employee felt as though the mentoring was punitive. And so then with it being punitive, it started out where it means you as the mentor have to work a whole lot harder to build trust to be able to knock that wall down. But in their mind, there was nothing to be gained by going on this journey, on this mentoring journey. So just when you were talking about that, that was one kind of practical or real life lived experience.
Yeah, and I know that you're very much deep into the practice of serving as a mentor. I'm a little bit less now because I have other roles that I'm working in IMC and even in my own business life. So I defer certainly to that. So wonderful to acknowledge that one again. So thank you. So why don't we move into segment number 3? And what we're doing is just bringing up to date with a couple of things that are happening in the IMC. Now, one piece is that we're open for those who want to do their self-assessment to work on their certificate of competence. And the best place to start is wealthmovement.com/mentor. And that is WELLTH movement.com/mentor. That's a place to get started to actually apply to get the access to the self-assessment. There are other ways to get a hold of us, and they are listed on that page. And you will see them at the close of this video, and they are in the show notes as well when you come to hear this, read this video podcast later. Now, what we'll be doing is we'll be updating you with new numbers at the end of May on our next issue about who's in and who's gone through and how many people we've got involved. So we'll look forward to updating you on that. Now, a big announcement, as we mentioned in earlier shows, was in May where we're going to launch the Mentoring Circle Facilitator Program. Now, Doug and I had a conversation. We said, actually, instead of just launching it, why don't we do a beta test so that we can get people involved with looking at the profile to give us a sense of what would work, what wouldn't work, how would we approach this, and get the community involved. Remember, community is about co-creation, collaborative conversations. So that's what we're going to do. So if you want to join the beta group, we're looking for 5 to 7. We'll take 3, but if we can get 5 to 7 people who are hearing this and want to get involved before May, let's say May 14th, and we get you to say, hey, listen, this is something I'd like to get involved with, then we would welcome you. It would require, I'm thinking, Doug, I'm thinking about 2 hours per week. 1 hour on an online conversation using something like Zoom, and 1 hour just doing your own review of what's going on and making some comments back and forth. So we're looking for a beta group so that we can launch the Mentoring Circle Facilitator Program. So that'll be kind of exciting when we get that up and going. Is there anything that you want to make an announcement about before I share something about reality shows on TV and the mentoring story that's connected to them? Anything you want to share with us, Doug?
Well, the one thing was that we're going, and account is going live with a virtual mentoring circle. So looking at doing, instead of it being face-to-face, which is what I'm offering today, this will now be one that we're going to open up, you know, sort of the participation in it and do it virtually. And it will follow much the same, in fact, almost the identical sort of format that we use in the in-person mentoring circle. And so I think we had talked about the beginning of June that we were looking at launching that.
June 4th.
Okay.
And that would be at 12 Mountain, which is 2 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to do it coinciding with the Mentoring 37 Tuesdays, so that will always be the first and third Tuesdays of the month. So thanks for that. And I've been mentioning seeding throughout this, the video podcast, is something about speed and something about, I'm going to call it what is now known as the halo effect. So let me give you a bit of context here. One of the things that I've been doing is reading about mentoring, and every once in a while I do turn on the TV just to have a little bit of a break from what's going on. And I clicked on American Idol, and I went, hang on a minute. When one of the established singers gets to talk to one of the up-and-coming singers, there's a potential there for a mentoring relationship. Often it sort of might come across more of an instructive or maybe even coaching. But if the mentee, in other words, the up-and-coming singer, was to ask questions of the established singer, who now could we call the mentor, then there is this potential for a mentoring relationship. Now, we don't always see it, but I would think that it's there, right? But they're on that edge of instructing. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting. So in a sense, there's a couple of things happening there. There could be speed mentoring because it's done so quickly that the person only gets to meet them, get the information, and off the person goes. It's not like, oh, I'm going to spend the next, 6 weeks with you and you're going to improve my singing. All right. So there is this notion of speed mentoring. Now, that works great, and it can work in organizations as well. But there's something about what's called the halo effect. Now, what happens is the halo effect is this belief that there's this halo above this established singer. Now, in the workplace, it might be an executive who comes to a coffee chat. And the halo would suggest, well, if they said it, I should do it because they've done it and they're successful. And I go, all right, what that person is sharing, whether it's the executive or the established singer, they're sharing what they call best practices. But it doesn't mean those best practices of that person will become wise practices for you. So we've got to stay alert to when you are in a mentoring relationship, whether it's a long-term speed version, wherever it might be happening, don't always take what the mentor says as being, this is the way, do it, and you will be successful, right? It doesn't work that way. What you've got to do is you've got to discern what they say. Does it apply to you? Will it actually help you with your learning? Will it give you an opportunity to get into continuous improvement? So I just wanted to share that one, and it was prompted just because I was watching American Idol, right? Just an excerpt as I was flying through. I was looking for something more on the History Channel, and I just went, hang on a minute, and that's what prompted this. And so pay attention to the halo effect. Now, we need to get probably close to closing here, and I would just acknowledge that Doug is going to be bringing some information about technology. We've said that. We found someone, and we're going to just shoot some short videos so we can bring those to you about mentoring and technology. But I guess as we get to close, we just want to say that the next Mentoring 37 video podcast is May 21st, 10 Mountain. And if you want to join us, let us know. Get a hold of us through our blogs. I'm at wealthmovement.com/wealth-blog or talentc.ca/blog. Those are listed at the back. Along with the blog comes our contact information, and that's where you can get a hold of us. As you can appreciate, we're not sharing our emails here is because we don't want to get Lots of emails from people just because they've done a skim of show notes and things like that. We ask that you just take a little bit more of a step to get to us. We're not offering it as a barrier by any means. It's just that I think you can appreciate where we are in today's world. So with that, next time we get together on the 21st at 10 a.m., we're going to be discussing the importance of fairness, respect, and trust in the mentoring arrangement. So with that, Doug, as always, you get to take us out. What would you like to share?
So just all I want to say to those folks listening in is it is now time for you to join the mentoring movement. And we want you to be able to share the gift of mentoring and make every minute a mentoring minute.